This is the Authority Company podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and I am a huge movie fan. Actually, kind of a nerd. I love to know how movies are made, how much it costs to be made. And if you know that, you know it's very, very expensive these days. But my guest today has found a way to make high budget looking movies, TV shows, and commercials at a fraction of the cost. His name is Brian T. Nowak. He is the founder of Magic Box, and he is transforming the way movies are being made. We're going to get into how he came up with the idea, what he's doing, and why he doesn't think independent cinema is dying. Brian Nowak, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Joe. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Oh, I'm glad you're happy to be here. It's always good when people don't feel like they're forced to come on the podcast. So that's a good start for me. So Brian, I always like to find analogies in these conversations. And I feel like, with climate change, people are like, and it's kind of a random thing to start with, Brian, but in climate change, people are like, we're going to need technology to solve this because humans don't seem like they all want to get on board on the whole thing. So we're going to have to find, hopefully technology will fix this issue. And I think when it comes to the sort of, I guess, the dynamics of making content and high-end entertainment about costs, all of these consolidations, the streaming world, which we'll get into, technology is the way out, like the way to move forward. And that's where sort of Magic Box comes in. It is finding a way to help with these the exorbitant costs that you're seeing going into creating high-end content. And I'm talking about feature films, commercials, and stuff like that. So let's talk about your introduction to this. Why was it important to found this company? And was the sort of the economics of the business what kind of drove you in this direction?
Sure. I mean, in full transparency, when I originally got into this, it was driven by creative opportunities first and foremost. The new ways to produce content using virtual production technologies inside LED studios was extremely intriguing because it gave us the ability to really push the edge creatively as far as we possibly could imagine and do it faster and cheaper than ever before, which is great. As I've gotten into it, I started to learn about all the additional benefits, and talking about the environment is one of the most important and significant ones that I was really happy to discover. We as LED studio technology think, oh, it's billions of little tiny light diodes lighting up. That takes a lot of power. It actually doesn't. It doesn't take as much power as you would think. And in fact, we have third-party testing that proves that LED studio technology it uses about a third of the same power costs as a green screen productions in of the same scale and size. So that's huge. And then when you start to think about all the other carbon footprint savings we can have using virtual production just in and of itself compared to traditional production, it starts to compound significantly because you don't have all the posts that you normally have as well. So you start to really see some tremendous impact, environmentally speaking, using this technology. And that was a really pleasant surprise to come across.
That's so cool. And also the cost savings. I think for folks that are familiar with Star Wars and their current crop of stuff, they've introduced this thing called the volume, which I'm sure you're very aware of. It's these giant screens where essentially they don't have to go to Tunisia anymore to film A New Hope. They could go into some sort of backlot in Georgia or in Southern California, and they have all these giant screens that are projecting the desert background, which they famously did with the Mandalorian series. And in a way, that's sort of the space that you're living in. It's not a green screen. It's like basically you're surrounding somebody with all of these visuals where they could feel like they're living in that environment. So let's unpeel your technology a little bit. So you mentioned the word virtual studio.
Mhm.
How does it work in that scale? Because I think a lot of us are familiar, like I said, the Star Wars model, these giant mega screens that are projecting these images. How does it work with Magic Box?
So that is exactly the technology that we have. It's one to one. It's the exact same technology. We've just miniaturized it and mobilized it. So that completely immersive environment where you're completely surrounded by LED walls and ceiling, that's exactly what we deliver. That's the technology that ILM really kind of spearheaded and developed in those large, grand LED volumes that they have created. And that's what took off very rapidly. But people realized pretty quickly that those are really expensive to build and even more expensive to operate. And that's where we kind of found our first initial success being a smaller version of that that was mobile. We were able to a build these LED volumes, or what I like to call LED studios, because it's just easier for everyone to know, understand what you're talking about. We were able to build them much cheaper, and then because we're mobile, because we literally are transformers. We're a semi trailer that transforms by flipping switches into a soundstage with an LED volume inside. We're able to go wherever the production needs to happen. So we don't have to be in a soundstage on some major studio lot. We can be in a parking lot. We can be in the middle of the desert. We can be in the street in front of your house. Anywhere you can fit our semi trailer, we can have a true LED virtual production happening.
Wow, so cool. I did see some videos online where you were inside your trailer and you guys were doing sort of, like, you simulated like a driving scene where there was a car in the trailer, like a regular, sedan, and then you had all the screens surrounding it to mimic filming, driving. And Brian, years ago, I shot a short film, and one of the things that I noticed when you're on a budget, shooting driving scenes is very expensive and very elaborate. Like, I think we ended up having to put the DP just in the front seat and then using drones for exteriors,
Yep.
which is very popular these days. But I think people are kind of getting over that drone shot, I think. So tell me about how this not only saves a ton of money, but saves time, because as you know, when you're shooting outdoors, there's limited light, there's permits, there's a lot of things that go into shooting outdoors.
Yeah, I think car process is it's, been around forever and then there's so many different ways to do it from poor man's process, which is about as cheap as you can possibly do it to, putting cars up on trailers and then attaching, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to those trailers and having crew members hanging off them and then driving around city streets or driving around the block millions of times to get your shots and everything in between. Magic Box doing car process is far superior to all of those techniques, and that I think is where we are first and foremost generating the most value to productions is in car process. So you can put just about any consumer vehicle inside Magic Box, from little tiny sports cars all the way up to big giant SUVs and pickup trucks. And we've had everything from a 64 Alfa Romeo to a Cadillac Escalade or like a GMC Sierra 2500, just giant vehicles that weigh 8,000 pounds. So we can get large vehicles inside, and then we completely immerse them in LED screens, and we put those driving plates that are produced by third party companies up on the walls. And yeah, it looks like we're driving down the road anywhere. And the benefits are numerous. Number one, safety. You're not putting a car and people and equipment in danger by putting them on a trailer driving around the block, which is gonna, that's the traditional way they did it for big budget movies and TV. You're not destroying a car by putting a pod on top of it and bolting it down and connecting it to the driving mechanisms of the vehicle, which you can do with basic cars, but you can't do those with classic cars, or electric cars. So, you need to have a different solution. And then in terms of quality, we look like you're really driving down the street because that's really what's outside the windows is that footage. So you have that true realism look and you have total control of it when you're inside Magic Box. So we do that kind of stuff all the time for movies, TV shows, commercials. You can see commercials that have been shot in Magic Box for cars. You can see our scenes, car process scenes on TV shows on there right now. It's really amazing, and it's I think the most impact that we can have in a production is in a car process type of environment.
That's so cool. Were you involved in that? Because the first time I had heard about this was there's a Sean Penn, Dakota Johnson movie a couple years ago where actually I think it was within the last year where it was like 100% of the movie was shot in the car, but the car wasn't driving. They shot it all with screens around him. Were you familiar with? I think it was called Daddio or something like that. Were you involved with that one?
We weren't involved with that one. That came or that was shot before we
Oh,
released this our truck, but that would be the perfect type of production that would take the most advantage of our technology. In fact, we are talking with a feature that we might potentially be working on this summer that's very similar to that. About 65% of it is shot inside moving vehicles.
wow, so cool. And so I think a lot of us now that especially if you're like a cinephile or a fan of like, fantasy films, stuff like that, you're starting to see like the seams. and the limitations of the volume. Like I think Ant-Man 3 was probably like the perfect example of it, where essentially the entire thing was shot in the volume, and people were like, I don't want that. I don't want to see an entire movie shot in a volume. It just looks fake. There's something it's sort of like uncanny valley about it. And obviously where you guys come in is like you don't it's unless it's a movie where it's completely shot in a car, that's a different thing. You're heightening what can possibly done in car driving scenes, for an example. It's not the end all be all for the film, but able to really kind of find a solution to a problem that people have had for years when it comes to those kind of shooting those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, we take two perspectives on all production. Like first and foremost, we're not just car process. We do true virtual production, the same exact type of production with camera tracking sensors and 3D environments are rendered onto the walls, just like they did for Ant-Man and so many other Marvel movies and Star Wars movies as well, or Star Wars TV shows. The the difference is we don't bill ourselves as the end all be all. We're not the final solution for production. We are not the only methodology of virtual production that's going to make sense. We are a methodology for virtual production that makes sense some of the time. And when it does, we're going to be really good at the types of things that we do. And sometimes you might need a bigger LED volume to get what you want. Sometimes green screen is going to be the right thing to do. Sometimes Pepper's Ghost or rear screen projection might be the best thing to do. But you will know when we are the best thing to do because it's going to be obvious. You're going to get the best quality. You're going to have the most cost effective. You're going to have the most convenient and safe and fast solution that's out there. And it's really clear when the choice is us. And for us, we want those things to be prevalent, but also we want the technology to disappear. We don't want you to, whether you're the talent or you're the production company, and most importantly, when you're the viewer, we don't want you to see that. We don't want the technology to stand out in the production or in the final product. We want it to disappear. We want them to forget they're shooting inside of it, and we never want the customer or the viewer to see that that's where it was done.
That's so cool. I always say the best ideas are the ones that you think should already be around. And I would say like the best name for something is something like, oh, isn't that a thing already? Like, no. So like the idea of Magic Box seems like such an obvious thing. And since we're all aware of like the technology that is around in terms of like what we're talking about, the volume,
Right.
when you came up with it and decided to make this sort of like your passion, were you sort of like, wait, there's no one doing it like we're gonna do it? Like, were you surprised that, and again, there's probably people that are doing similar things to you, but no one was doing exactly what you were doing. Like, were you surprised that you would come up with this and were like, oh, we're the only ones doing it like this?
Um, I wouldn't say surprised. I was scared, to be honest, because the first and foremost, like I said, when we got into the game early on, we were still in stealth for a couple years. ILM, like there was a one volume at Manhattan Beach Studios when we started. Within a year and a half, 2 years before we'd even released our prototype, there was only about half a dozen at the most globally. And the trend was bigger. And it seemed like every couple months there'd be another press release, another post on social media that said the world's largest volume has just opened its doors. So they were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they were going, I think, the first LED volume that they shot Mandalorian in was about $10 million to build unofficially, and within 2 years, the volumes were costing $100 million to build. So they were getting really big, very expensive, and that was the trend. And here was I coming out saying, "We're gonna go small." Like I tested what's the smallest volume I can build. It's still going to have impact and be able to do. My goal was to be able to do 65% of any type of production. And the approach there was, if you think about entertainment content, it's what you and I are doing right now. It's two people having a conversation. They're in close proximity to each other. It's usually a medium shot and a bunch of close-ups. That's 65% of everything we see on TV and in the movies. So the goal was I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to do two-person, three-person dialogue scenes. And as we started building the prototype, I realized quickly, like there's an opportunity for car process. It's just a mess of a situation. It's a pain in the butt. It's, complicated. It's low quality in many cases, and it's unsafe. So we put a motorized turntable inside the floor of the Magic Box, so we could pull cars in and out, and rotate them around, and make that type of production really fast and convenient. And then again, that just kind of doubled down on our size and form factor and made it, more possible to do more with it at a lower cost. But still, we were looked at in the industry as, okay, that's novel, but what are you can't really do anything with it. Everybody else is going bigger. Well, they were wrong. Now all those places are going out of business, and the few that are still in business are usually running at a smaller scale. They're rarely running their full size volume unless it's for a big, massive shot. So there's huge advantages to being small, but we didn't have that proof when we started. So it was very scary to have that hunch. And fortunately, I was making those decisions based on 25 years of production experience and knowing what I was always looking for and what I'd done in the past in things like green screen studios, and thought this could work. And it's, as it turns out, it does.
Wow. It's crazy because, funny how you say you were scared, and the fact that you had all this knowledge in terms of like the because I always like to say, Brian, like when it comes to mentorship and people I've learned from, I've learned what not to do more than what to do from my mentors. So with you, when you started this, did you have like entrepreneurial mentors to show you the way in terms of like the right and wrong way, or like I said, the what to avoid the wrong things, like because it just seems like the jump you made, as for some people, like, oh, he's a visual effects guy and he started a visual effects company. There's a lot in between there, between those 2 points in your life.
Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, I have been an entrepreneur for almost 25 years as well. This is my fifth company that I started or founded with partners or owned at some point. So I'm no stranger to that kind of level of risk taking. I'm very comfortable in that kind of environment. I've also been fortunate enough to acquire many friends and colleagues that have become business advisors and advisors in the space that we're in now. And I think that a couple of them in particular in virtual production space, like James Blevins, who was one of our first virtual production advisor, who's the CEO of Mesh Virtual Production. They're virtual production consultants. That he would give me a lot of insights into what is being done at those very early stages and what to avoid, some of those pitfalls to avoid, and also what's coming down the pipe that maybe we should hold on and wait for. Likewise, I also had advisors like Sam Nicholson, who's the founder of Stargate Studios, a virtual production pioneer, and also a visual effects, guru going back for decades. And he, I think, was really really critical in our product market fit. He's an ASC cinematographer. He's a VFX, maven. He was really like, you're gonna want this, and he really helped me dial in the product market fit to make sure it was going to work for our customers, and that was really critical. And he also stressed the importance of the service component of our business as well. Like, we're not just delivering technology; it has to be delivered in a way that people can use it, and there's a human to human service that's associated with that. And he stressed how important that was, and that is something that I've taken with me ever since. And we make sure that we're good at delivering the service of our customer, our product experience, as well as the product itself.
That's so cool. And just be vaguely familiar with this part of of your world is, a lot of equipment, as many people not know this, most people don't buy their equipment; it's rented, right? And so you'll hire like a crew to say, hey, what equipment do you need, and they'll fill out a list, and here's you get it, and then you go down to your local shop and you rent all this equipment. How does this dynamic work when you're using Magic Box in terms of like the DP, the director of photography? Like, how involved are you in terms of them getting their shots? Is it something like a set it and forget it where you guys, and again, you're probably not like this, but you're not a company that's gonna, hey, here's Magic Box, good luck. uh,
If
call us in a week when you're done with using our equipment. Like, tell me how that dynamic works between you and the creative side.
Yeah, I mean, it's first and foremost, it's very flexible and agile. It's really about how much support you need. There's a lot of people who are very savvy in production inside LED volumes or LED studios now, and you don't need to do the hold handing that maybe you needed to do 4 or 5 years ago when this technology was really still emerging. So we had just asked, like, what support do you need? What questions can we answer for you? And we make sure that we're available preceding the actual production on any level that they need to have that consultation. So they're successful. That's important to us. And yes, we would never ever just drop off the truck and walk away. We want to make sure that your production is successful. So we deploy the vehicle with 3 people, 3 crew members to operate it to assure that your production has success. We make sure that logistically all the questions are answered before we even leave our lot to go to your production to make sure when we get there, there's success. We make sure that all your questions are answered as the content producer, as the DP, as the cinematographer, as the director, as the AD, whomever needs to be involved. We make sure that all their questions are asked and answered before we ever even leave the lot. Because we want this to show up and everybody be like, "Wow, that's cool! It just happened." And then we go inside and they are like, "Wow, this is so cool!" And then they just do their job the way they always have done. And when they're done, they're like, "Wow, we did that so much faster. It was so much easier. This was such a good experience. We didn't even think about the fact that we were inside this truck in the middle of a parking lot in the middle of nowhere." And that's exactly what we want.
That's awesome. That's good. That's good stuff. All right, let's talk about the economics of this because we're recording this shortly after the Oscars, and if anyone's watched Sean Baker, the filmmaker behind Anora, during the awards circuit, he decried the death of independent cinema and the fact that independent movies are not what they used to be. Brian, I'm a card carrying Gen Xer, and I grew up going down to my local art house and seeing the latest movie from France, seeing like a kung fu movie, and the idea of like young filmmakers scraping by, like someone like Quentin Tarantino on a shoestring budget making Reservoir Dogs. Like the idea of that happening anymore is just unfortunately dying, as said beautifully by Sean Baker during the Oscars. So how does a company like yours help? Because as we know, when it comes to independent cinema, it's produced independently. It's people actually putting money out of their own pocket to make this thing. And the cost of talent, the cost of shooting on location somewhere has just raised exponentially. And now you make that thing, it's not even going to play in a movie theater because the movie theater is only going to show the latest, Pixar movie. Um,
Mhm.
how do you guys help during in this new world order of making movies? Because it's a lot harder for a young indie to get their content out on screens all over the world.
Yeah. I love this question, so be ready for a long answer. Feel
Let's
free to
do it.
just however you wanna do it. But, I come from the same school of thought in the '90s. There was a huge, impact of independent films. And you think about what Miramax was doing, what directors like Quentin Tarantino were just coming up, Kevin Smith just coming up, what they were doing, Ed Burns. These guys were making really culturally impactful and significant movies on shoestring budgets, millions of dollars budget. They were still maxing out credit cards and giving blood to fund movies, which was amazing. Those were the directors that were inspiring me when I was coming up through college, and that's who I wanted to be like when I got out of school. So I very much understand that kind of mantra and that perspective on production. I disagree with the fact that the notion that it's dying. In fact, I think, yeah, it's gone away. Big budget, big, like super big budget has become the thing for the past, definitely past 15, 20 years. But it's changing right now. We're seeing it happen right now. I mean, look at two of the biggest movies or the most talked about movies over the past 18 months, 2 years, with Anora and then also with Godzilla minus one. Huge movies, tremendously successful, and super low budget. A24, another great example. Their movies are coming out really low budget. Yeah, they're under that studio mantra, but they're finding ways to do it cost effectively. I mean, even this might seem silly, but let's think about the Hallmark Channel. They're producing hundreds of movies a year, hundreds, under $5 million a show. That's a huge accomplishment. And I think that you're going to see that accelerated and amplified even more with kind of two things coming up. Number one, there's a massive trend happening with production using this and some good lenses and things like that. And let's face it, it looks good. The company who makes this shoots all their commercials on this. That happens. And they look good. You can do a lot with that. And that makes anyone a cinematographer. And they're also training to be a cinematographer every day using that same tool. I'm better at shooting things with my phone than I am with an actual camera. So I think that putting like movie production in the palm of your hand, literally, and giving you the ability to practice and train with that every day from a young age to, adulthood when you're ready to start doing these types of things is playing a tremendous role in the rebirth of independent production. Whether it's a movie, a TV show, a short, that's a different conversation. But the rebirth of production in the palm as independently done is being spearheaded by that. What's going to take it to the next level as we talk about cinematic storytelling, I think will be Magic Box and other companies that are decentralizing production from Hollywood. And I think that's one of the most interesting opportunities that Magic Box really creates, because we can go anywhere, because we're bringing that same technology that they made Mandalorian in for Star Wars to anyone, anywhere at a price they can afford. We can change that paradigm. We can bring big budget visual effects to you wherever you happen to be. And, that sounds like nice and grand, but think about it. Think about it. This is the analogy I like to give all the time. Pizza. Everybody's like, "Oh, if you like pizza, do you like New York thin crust? You like Chicago deep dish?" But if you think about it, there's lots of different kinds. They have the Sicilian in Detroit. If you go to St. Louis, they have this like really thin, crackery pizza. If you go to California, they just have terrible pizza. There's everywhere has got kind of a different type of pizza, but they're always kind of centralized in these major cities. What happens if we get pizza in Atlanta? What happens if we get pizza in Tampa? What happens if we get pizza in St. Helena? What happens if we get pizza in Montpelier? Like all these little towns and even littler towns, maybe there's 500 people. What's different about their pizza? What's different about the ingredients they use, the spices they use? We don't know when it comes to movies because you got to go to Hollywood. You gotta go to New York. You gotta go to these polarizing places, so you get influenced by those ingredients and those things and those people there. But there's so much more that we're missing in this giant country of ours. So when you can take Hollywood technology and deliver it to all those places, you're gonna get a horror movie that's got a little bit of a different twist, a little bit of a different spice because it was made in the middle of New Mexico or because it was made in Cleveland or maybe, even smaller, like Canton, Ohio, like wherever you can imagine. So this is, I think, the opportunity that we unlock. And we're doing it at a time where people have other tools like this that they can really start to produce long format content again very cost effectively and have it look just as good as anything else that's out there. And that's what I think is really exciting about the rebirth of independent productions that are happening right now.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Any moments you can share about Magic Box that where people, watching or listening to this may be like, "Oh, shoot, that was a Magic Box thing." Are there any that you can talk about, or is everything kind of like under lock and key? Who
No,
who you're able to discuss?
no, we have. I mean, there's lots where with anything else, you're not allowed to say anything until it's on the air or it's not until it's released. But we've got lots of stuff out there right now that we can talk about. There's several car commercials. Have you seen the car commercial for the Dodge Hornet where little kids driving? That was shot inside Magic Box, and in fact, we shot 6 different versions of that commercial in about 8 hours. To give you an idea of the volume, we had 4 different vehicles inside. There's still versions of that commercial that haven't even come out yet. There's a Subaru Forester commercial that's on the air right now where a woman brings a dog home from the SPCA. We shot that in the parking lot of the SPCA in Inglewood, California. Like that was one that was really cool that we did. It's on the air right
Wait, I
now.
love that commercial. You shot that
Yeah.
inside a truck?
It's inside a truck, inside of a parking lot behind the SPCA in Inglewood. Yeah, it's great.
Wow. And tell me
Uh,
about there's a list because people I think are probably aware of that commercial because that's a great spot.
yeah.
With the idea of like, filming this really heart-wrenching, like you immediately like are
Also,
melting while you're watching it. And the fact that you're filming it in the back of a semi truck is just fascinating to me. So how does it happen in terms of like the length of time? Because as you know, they always say don't work with babies and dogs, but like
Yeah.
being able to film something like this, like how much easier is it than than in real life how we're used to it?
Well, that's what I like about those 2 examples because yeah, they always say, "Don't work with kids, don't work with animals. They're really hard to work with." With, like, the first 2 car commercials we did, which are both on national spots on air right now, we're worth both of those. You wouldn't have been able to do those any other way. It just and that's what's great is, you know, a lot of times, especially early on, the production company I'll get a call from the production company head or from the, agency head, and they'll look at me straight in the face and they'll say, "This better fucking work." And say, "Don't don't worry, it will." And we do the shoot, and afterwards, you just get this childlike surprise and delight, from the producer, from I've had the folks from the brands, the director, the cinematographer, the DPs come out and say, "This was so cool. We would not have been able to do this without you." And then we get calls now like we had a show, we're shooting 4 commercials for a brand, a couple weeks ago when the fires hit, and we had to evacuate our production zone because we were on the edge of the one of the fires, and, we had just gotten started. We were just 2 days in. We had 5 more days of production, and, everyone thought it was gonna get scrapped, and the production company came back and said, "No, we're able to salvage this production because of Magic Box, because
Wow.
we can do so much." Like, we're not just doing car process, we're doing lots of virtual production, we're doing lots of different environments and scenes. There's heavy visual effects in these beyond, like, in post, beyond, what we're doing. None of this would be possible if the production couldn't be done inside Magic Box because we make it affordable. We're enabling the agencies to push creative really far and do really high-end visual effects productions inside this, and again, we're doing it in a dirt lot on the back of a ranch.
That's
And
so cool. All right, I know
and
you. I don't want you to divulge like the costs and stuff like that, but give us so we have some sort of context. Like the idea of doing a car commercial.
yeah.
How much cheaper is it using Magic Box? Is it 50% cheaper than your traditional filming of going outdoors and blocking sets and all that jazz? 20% cheaper? Give me some sort of idea, like what people are saving here.
That it's gonna vary based on your production, for sure, and is it an independent production? Is it a, big budget? Are we shooting the next episode of Grey's Anatomy, which we do? Are we shooting next episode of 911 or a high potential? Or is it, an independent thing? That varies a lot. The good as far as, like, how much cheaper it is, I would say it's in general, we're anywhere from 3 to 10 times cheaper than a competing production, and I include green screen in that. In fact, green
Hang
screen
on a second.
the
You didn't say 3 to 10%. You said 3 to 10
times
times?
cheaper. Yes. Yes. Yeah, we're call it, 30 to 10% of the cost of doing LED volume production, doing car process on a trailer, doing green screen production. Like the same exact thing done in green screen is more than 3 times what it costs inside Magic Box. And not to mention, we're faster. And this is where you get even more, you get compound cost savings because we show up on a lot or wherever you're shooting, you're not moving your company anywhere. We show up and in 35 minutes, you're loading into the truck. And within the hour, you're ready to shoot.
Wow.
You're not wasting days in setup time. You're not wasting time for someone to paint a psych green. You're not wasting time for these guys to light a green screen wall. Like you're getting your production done. We shot 120 shots, 3 cameras, 120 shots for a TV show for 911 a couple weeks ago. And I mean, we had a 52Y. I mean, you can't get that many alt takes in a regular production day. We shot like almost a third of an episode of an hour-long show.
Wait,
In one
you did
day.
100 shots in a day?
120. Three
How
cameras.
is that even, like, physically possible? That would take what? That would take, like, what, 5 or 6 days on a regular shoot? Something like that?
It all depends on the director and the production company, but these guys, they work inside Magic Box a lot. This wasn't our first day with them. They're very familiar and comfortable with how it all works, and they were like, "This is how we can really." They write scenes now to shoot inside the truck because it's they're comfortable with it. They see the value and they really want to push it now. Like, how much can we milk out of this? And it still is very cost effective. But
Wow.
when you start to look at that compound savings, the volume of coverage you can get and how much you can get in a single day, that savings is almost immeasurable.
Wow, that is cool. Now, earlier you mentioned you were scared doing this. I don't. You're probably not that scared anymore, right? This is working.
No, I mean, it's definitely working. I always like, never want to get overly confident, especially when it comes to technology and, anything can happen. But our job now is to put in as many measures as we can and redundancies and safety nets and to make sure that regardless of what comes up, we're able to roll with the punches and still make the production happen. So
That's
that's
so cool. And you mentioned, we talked about like how this is basically a mini version of the volume that people know about Star Wars. Now, does as now and as an entrepreneur, you said not your first rodeo, but do you worry like what I did here was ve- not to say simple, but I basically simplified a very complicated process. Do you worry that you've made it so easy for people to replicate? What is the what is the differentiator from stopping someone and be like, "Hey, I like what Magic Box doing. I can come up with a better way to do it." What tell me about that?
Yeah. So, of course, you're always worried in business like there of competition, but there is competition out there, and it's different. It doesn't offer the same solution we have, and not the same capabilities, not the same end result visually, and not the same service and the way we deliver and how fast we are. There's still nothing as fast and capable as we are out there. But that said, you what we have at the front end is very simple, and the experience of it is simple and it disappears. To deliver what we deliver in that way is extremely complicated. We have patents that cover our solution. We have that kind of protection, that IP protection, to help us, prevent people from just doing the same thing we're doing. But honestly, it's hard as fuck. You, you're not, you can't just do what we do. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do it repeatably, reliably, over and over and over again with the same experience and the same predictability and the same speed. That's where it gets hard. And that's where people are going to have a hard time competing with us because that's the trick that we figured out and that we are able to repeatably deliver over and over and over again. Knock on wood.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. All right, last thing. In terms of a bucket list for Magic Box, is there some sort of project that you'd be like, yeah, I definitely want to do, either whether it's a filmmaker, whether it's an IP, is there something out there that you definitely want to get done in the next couple of years with Magic Box?
I mean, for me, it's easy to say like, yeah, sure, I'd love to work on a Star Wars production because that's kind of like the benchmark that was initially set. I'd love John Favreau to work inside the truck. That it's easy to say those things, but the reality is, what we're out to do is bring this technology to everyone. The people who haven't made a name for themselves yet, but they have that idea, they have that talent, but they maybe don't want to move to Hollywood or they don't want to move to the big city. Those are the people that I want to see using our products every day. And when we get to that point where those people are using our products every day, when colleges are using products to promote their athletes, and when independent movies and are being produced inside the trucks, and when I can go on YouTube and just see random social media influencers using, that's the type of thing that's going to be impactful to me, is to say like this has been adopted by the creatives are out there, the artists that are out there who have this capability and this skill, but didn't have the medium. Now they do.
Sweet, sweet. I feel so much better about the future of independent cinema now after speaking with you, Brian. If folks want to learn more about Magic Box, where should they start?
Magicbox.ninja.
So cool. Brian, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
And that'll do it for this episode. If you want to connect with me and find out more about our guests, go to theauthoritycompany.com.